So questions, dilemmas. Well, working, for us, part of the problem is, and it's increasingly the case. We start off the context of Britain and Ireland, in Scotland and England and Wales, slightly different the way this worked out. But your working class education was a thing which was driven mostly by trade union organisations, and for all sorts of reasons, which isn't part of what I'm talking about today. It's been reduced considerably. So but the people involved in CLS quite separately as activists in trade unions and also social organisations would promote education because the trade unions weren't doing it in the way they had done before. Within the academy, then we are as employees in universities, in the academy, we engage with the attack on higher education, and some things that Callum talked about earlier. CLS people have been involved in this in different places, and again, Brian Garvey was president of. You were president of UCU in Strathclyde, weren't you? Yeah. So there's a threat to humanities generally. This is just kind of stating some very obvious things about what's happening to our context, our working context. The alternative, well, I think Miguel spelled this out very well. There's a reason why we talk about the business school here, because after the first Thatcherite drive against social science in the 1980s, many sociologists find themselves out of sociology departments, social science departments, and they found a space in business schools to basically you're involved in the process of delivery education for capital managers, which is part of the history we have to think about whenever you think about the attack and critical management studies. It had a purpose, now it doesn't. That's why it's been pushed out. But I think Miguel made the point very well that the way that we deal with the context of our work isn't just about immediate issues around paying conditions, but it's actually a complex issue to do with the way in which the higher education is configured, and it's very easy, I think, to ignore the wider context whenever we're actually confronted by very particular issues in our own workplace. I won't say too much about CLS because we don't have a great deal of time. But again, if you want to pick up on this, you're welcome to look at this, and you can have this. You can have this as a later on, okay? But I suppose you could say that what defines a CLS current is its, as Dora it all say, think about the kind of interventions we have. It's historical, cultural transformation of capitalism as a social formation. I think everybody involved in CLS engages with that. It's not just about discourse, or it's not about post-structuralism. It's about the changing character of capitalism and the way that puts, affects us as researchers, as activists in the labor movement, social organizations. And it's something we're engaged in all the time. We can't avoid that. And also there's this thing about, things are happening very quickly. It's the acceleration of change is a very profound thing that we're trying to make sense of. And activation then, I suppose, and it's something I guess that Callum talked about earlier, how you actually then get involved in the process of change, the radicalization that goes with this. And it's something that I think has motivated us right from the start. And what this is last year's colloquium in Armagh City. In Ireland, and it was in the colloquium we had a number of academics, but we also had people who never been in the academy, with people talking about mining and despoliation, degradation of the environment, a new kind of colonialism in the north of Ireland, and the gold mining industry in the north. We had poets talking about their work and so on. So it's the Critical Labour Studies colloquium isn't just about us giving academic papers. It's about how we engage with people beyond the academy, because we think we have a role to play in that process. Not only that, but we think that because of the pressure, increasing pressure that academics face to keep away from, to avoid social labor movements. That actually, if we're socialist activists, we have to find a space in which we can collectively get together and do that. And it's very isolating, as we know, it's a global phenomenon as academics. It's very isolating to be a social movement activist on your own. It's very easy also just to work within the institutional context and to write another paper for another conference, another journal. We have to do that because you can't be a car worker and go into work and say, I'm not going to make a car today. I mean, it's part of our employment contract. We've got to, but there's no reason why we have to do it in the way the employer wants us to do it, or to write in the journals that they think are important journals. We have to say, no, we were right, and we will do our work in places which are different and distinct, and engage with the communities that we think we're talking about. Now, I don't know whether we'll have time to. Would we have time to look short on moving?
Not the matter of time, but technicalities, because we are, on the verge of collapse of internet. I wouldn't go for it.
Okay. What's that movie about? It's called The Day After Tomorrow. Okay, right. Okay. Well, so future proof. Right. So this, and I can pick up more in this debate because people might think, well, I'm involved in CLS, or I'm involved in CMS, or my trade union. Why is CLS different? We can talk about that because the origins of a movement, the current, things change over time. The characteristics of the formation of that have a very distinctive way of looking at the world as well. So what the thing is, do we have what kind of membership do we have? We might think about we've talked about this over period of time. What kind of newsletter do we have? Do we have a regular network membership board? What kind of collective do we have? And I think we never really resolved that. That's one of the things we were hoping to do at the conference, to talk about what CLS might be, because we don't own it. We have tried. How long ago was it? We actually put out a questionnaire, didn't we? I think we got 5 responses. But when you meet people, they say, "Oh yeah, we're in the CLS network, and we pick up on the articles that people are doing. It's very interesting." But you say, "Well, what do you think?" Well, I don't really know. I mean, I suppose it's something we can consider, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So, well, voilà.
Thank you.
Great. So thank you very much, and thank you for the invite, everybody. So can I ask everybody to stand up, please? Right, and it might be the title of my book, which you're looking at there, but really it's just an excuse to wake you up before I start, so you can sit down again now. Okay. It's always that period just after lunch, isn't it, when people want to fall asleep? So I thought it was a good idea just to try and wake you up a little bit. Okay, so what I want to talk to you about today is the role of political education and social movements. In effect, critical education is central to critical labour studies, which is what we're talking about today. And in particular, what I want to do is to talk about the changes to union education over time and what impact this has had on the way that trade unions function. So what I want to do is start with a sort of very brief overview of trade union education and look at some of the factors that led to the changes in the type of training that trade unions do and the type of training that the union reps receive. But then I want to move on to a discussion about why I think political education needs to be central to trade union renewal and organising practice. Because I think unless we do that, it really impacts on our chances of winning in industrial disputes. So what I also want to do is argue that political education of trade unionists is no longer something that most trade unionists in the UK even consider to be an important part of what we do in the union movement. And I think that's a huge mistake. There are many explanations to why that's the case, and I'm going to come on to those later. But I think it's mainly due to the fact the way trade union form has changed over time, over the last sort of 50 or perhaps 60 years. No, you just want to press it over then. There we go. Okay. So in the past then, a great many of trade union members taking part in trade union education were manual workers. perhaps with little or no formal education. And these people would have unlikely to have come into the educational process if it had not been for their trade unions and the education that was provided in those unions. So I think it's useful to think about unions as being schools of labour, where activists are developed through their activities within the union. So that's a form of experiential learning, seeing what's going on around them and then responding to that. Because I think it's in the process of developing that sort of involvement, should I say, in unions through organising and taking part in things like negotiation and speaking to members, etc., that union reps start to realise and reflect on the meaning of work and culture and the power and politics that influence the employment relationship and their own working lives. So in effect, as workers who are embedded in social, political and ideological aspects of work, they learn on the job about control of the labour process. But we can also think about formal education in unions as well. By that I mean, the courses that unions put on for their reps and their members, and think about those as labour schools. There's a sort of spaces created by unions in order that union reps have a place to reflect on workplace issues. They might consider what's happening in their own workplace, but also in wider society as well, and what's happening in terms of government policy and how that's impacting on what they do. And I think it's important to remember that it was generally recognised on both sides of industry, so employers and trade unions, that education of workers was important. But I think that's changed considerably over time, and it's far removed from the type of political education that we saw perhaps in the late 19th century and early 20th century. A hunger for adult education was a real feature of British trade unionism and socialist movements in the late 19th century. Many workers, as I've said earlier on, didn't get a good formal education or any formal education at all. Yet education was seen as a real powerful stimulus for working class awareness, making sure that people had an understanding of what was going on around them. Technical education boards were introduced back in the 1880s, and Ruskin College in Oxford, which Paul's just already mentioned, began offering worker education right back in 1899. And public funding by the government was given to the Workers' Educational Association. I'll come back to both of those in a minute, and that was in 1907. So we can see that, both sides of industry thinking this is important. But some people in the labour movement felt that the state's intervention in this area wasn't necessarily a benevolent attempt to ensure that workers' education are more, was important to the growing labour movement. So I think it's interesting to look back as well. So in 1908, a group of students at Ruskin College, Oxford, were really dissatisfied with the way they were being taught and the lack of Marxist political economy in the syllabus. So they formed the Plebs League. They had their own newsletter here, and they agitated for more political material within the curriculum. And when it didn't go as planned, they went on strike. So the students went on strike and started to boycott lectures. And basically what they did is they set up their own organisation and did that through the Plebs League. Here's a quote from a government report in 1918 that was looking at different aspects of adult education in general, but also focused on trade union education. As I've said, it was in recognition that education was beneficial, not just to the individual, but also to wider society as well. So we see this current running through. And if we jump forward 50 years, there was another report by government called Adult Education, A Plan for Development. And again, this report emphasised the importance of education, especially training and development for individuals, specifically in their role as shop stewards and activists. And this was the time where the Trades Union Congress were looking for legal and financial support for trade union education because of the contribution it could make to a more harmonious form of industrial relations. And I'll come back to that in a minute, because I think it's had a significant impact on the type of trade union education that we now have in the UK. So I just want to say what's happened prior to state funding of union courses that we have today. So syllabuses in the 1950s, before state intervention, were more problem orientated. So they covered things like political economy, the causes of unemployment, imperialism, colonialism, and they were developed specifically to show how the link and experiences of struggles in the workplaces and by union members was connected to the wider political and industrial conflict. And they were provided by a number of different organisations, the Workers' Educational Association, but also, importantly for us, and I think connecting to why we think critical labour studies is important, it was connected to university in the extramural studies department, which we don't have anymore. So the Workers' Education Association was set up to provide higher education in 1903, and today it's the largest voluntary sector provider of adult education and one of the UK's biggest charities. I just want to make a couple of comments about the history of trade union education before I move on. I'm very much connected to this, to sort of industrial relations research. There's been a lot of debate amongst trade unionists and educationalists about taking funding from the state. And the influential report that I've put on the slide here, the Royal Commission on Trade Unions and Employers Association, which is generally known as the Donovan Commission, named after its chair. The government, in this really, really detailed report, acknowledged the need for shop stewards training. They said it was immense. The commission was appointed to deal with the growth in the number of unpredictable and unofficial strikes in the UK, and they thought it needed to be cured as a matter of urgency. So it's a really wide-ranging report, and it's actually, if you've never read this report, it's fascinating reading. I go back to it all the time, and maybe it's just because I'm an industrial relations nerd, but I still find it a really, really interesting report. It really connects to stuff that's going on today as well. But it specifically said that the training of stewards should be part of a planned move to more orderly industrial relations, and recommended that grants be made available to employers via industrial training board to help cover the time off for stewards to attend courses. But of course, as you might imagine, there was a huge debate about the purpose and direction of trade union education, particularly if it was being funded by the state. Many people were opposed to that. And of great concern, and I think not just then, but today as well, was the removal of political education, the political content from that education, and the narrowing. So it's just focusing on collective bargaining and the skills needed for union reps to do their job. And yeah, so the wonderful quote there from John McElroy, who was obviously opposed to this, but his early career, he worked at the Oxford University Department for External Studies, and he was immensely critical of the TUC taking money for trade union education. Okay. But the TUC did play an important role in promoting the struggle for working class education in the past. They really pushed universities to widen their extramural departments to reach out to working class adults. And we can leap back right till 1922, and there's a photograph of the TUC General Council here that considered that providing educational facilities, they needed to encompass a wide range of subjects, but that has largely gone. And I think it's interesting when you see the General Council here, you can only see 2 women in this photograph. And we now have a position where we have the majority, women have the majority membership in trade unions in the UK, but still we don't have the majority of leaders in the UK. Anyway, let's not go off on a tangent. Let's just move on just before I finish, just to discuss political education more generally and why it matters, I think, in the context of the current union movement, and in particular in terms of organising practice, because I think it's important in terms of rebuilding union membership and power. I think political education means facilitating students to take risks, to challenge those people with power, to develop a critical awareness, and to be reflexive about how authority is used in the classroom. So it should include things like confidence building, the unlocking of potential, and the drawing on the lived experience of students in the group, all of the students in the group. And it's really about equipping people with the knowledge and skills to participate in the labour movement, but also in wider political process as well. But crucially, I think, to understand and analyse political issues and make informed decisions as citizens, but also to think about how that impacts on the workplace and members in the workplace. I think if we don't have a union membership that's highly educated, we have less participation in decision making. I don't know what it's like in unions that you might know about or that you're involved in, but I know that in my own union and in unions across the UK, that participation is generally very low, despite a high membership in some places. And I think political education is about developing a shared language and an understanding and a vision about a future politics, a possible politics, but also understanding the distinction between our different positions. It doesn't mean that people have to agree on everything. In fact, not agreeing and having those discussions and debates and understand how we come from different perspectives is really important. Because if we don't have those debates, what happens is we end up in a situation where I think we're largely moving to, we've got really polarised debates where people don't actually speak to each other, but they speak it at cross purposes. So my argument is that political education makes us better organisers and a stronger labour movement. Okay, I'm nearly finished. Did it go over? There we go. So I think, again, political education should equip people to analyse the power structures that operate, not just in the workplace, but also in wider society as well. Finding out where those weak points of resistance are. Breaking the dead weight of coercive ideology, I think, is also a prerequisite for collective resistance. It creates a potential for asking and answering different questions. And as we've already seen, the labour movement was once strongly committed to the value of providing political education as a means of developing critical thinking. But unfortunately, this type of worker education, I think, to all intents and purposes, you can still find some examples, but to all intents and purposes, has really been abandoned by the UK trade union movement. Trade unions have become much more professionalised, by which I mean that recruitment and organising and collective bargaining are mainly done by full-time officers. That's not saying exclusively, but mainly done by full-time officers. So there's, what happens at grassroots level is largely casework. So there's not that wider involvement in the union as well. Okay, so I just want to talk lastly then about some work we've been doing in the Ella Baker School of Organising. And the Ella Baker School was established about 6 years ago now in response to a lack of political education in the trade unions. We aim to provide education programmes that are about awakening people's sense of agency, giving people the skills to be change makers, to be strategists, and importantly, leaders within their own organisation as well. And our approach to movement organising says that change will happen when those who are affected by a particular injustice organise themselves to build the power they need to achieve the justice they demand. So it's very much a do-for-self approach to change making, which I think probably can be summed up in Marx's assertion that the emancipation of the working class is the act of the working class. And I think traditional education assumes that there's some existing knowledge that must be conveyed to us. But the position that we hold within the school is very much about movement education, is about we must learn how to learn. We draw upon our own experiences as a means of testing how our thoughts fit with the real world, but also those people around us as well. So we don't tell people what to do, but we get people to think and critically analyse various things. We've produced lots and lots of materials, which are all freely available on the website. You can go and take a look at it. But really, what we're trying to put forward is a form of political education which is about equipping people with the skills. And there's a wonderful quote from Eugene Debs, founder of the Industrial Workers of the World. He said, "I would not lead you into the promised land if I could, because if I led you in, someone else would lead you out. You must use your heads as well as your hands and get yourself out of your present condition." Okay, my final slide. Just a comment on political education and power before I finish. In organising theory, we often talk about different forms of power: power within, power over, power to, power with. So power over, often within capitalism, is about control and coercion. And from a workers' perspectives, it's also where we build collective strength through the acting with others. Power with is very much about working with others who are experiencing the same problems and looking for solutions. Power to is the process where individuals begin to navigate rather than be driven by the forces that shape their lives. And power within is the process when someone realizes that they have worth and that they can make a difference. And it's an important counter-narrative that blames the victim for, it's an important counter, should I say, to the narrative that blames victims for unemployment, low wages, debt, etc. And this is what we believe in the school is the real importance of political education. And that's what we mean when we say that we aim to be or create agents of curiosity who are able to act in their own self-interest. Okay, so thank you.
Okay, so just like Julia said, I am migration scholar and unionist, and what I am about to present and share with you is embedded first and foremost in my research on migration from Ukraine and within Ukraine that I've been involved in for over a decade, and at some point this research started more and more intersect with labor issues and union issues. So well, it's what I'm about to present. It's not even a synthesis, but more of an intersection. But the important context is that I come from migration research, and this is where my interests in broadly defined Ukrainian issues come from. Not this one. Sorry. Have I? Oh, it does. So we shall have this migration issues in the back of our heads, and I will elaborate about it a bit later. But what I want to bring in today, and what serves as an inspiration, and conceptual framework for my presentation, are the concepts related to basically center peripheries and peripheral regions, silencing and unsilencing different unobvious voices. So the concepts which the labor scholars and unions are quite familiar with, of solidarity, and in particular fixed solidarity is the concept which has made a stunning career in social anthropology over the last years. I even put here the shortest possible definition of the concept of fixed solidarity. And it is broadly used in anthropology, in migration studies, and I think it can also be it also works well with this kind of workers or old-fashioned proletarian internationalist solidarity. Then I'm also dealing with the issues of epistemic violence or epistemic imperialism, which again, in the shortest possible way, can be kind of, reduced to the ways the knowledge is accumulated, distributed, who produces knowledge, but also who is being listened to, and who talks about whom, who is represented, or who is well, basically who represents what. Okay, and since this issue revolves around the armed conflicts and the ongoing war in Ukraine, the important context and a kind of source of inspiration is to kind of overcome or not to limit ourselves to this kind of geopolitical simplifications, or what I call the global chessboard. So what you are about to hear is well, these are the narrative of living, working, organizing at the time of war, but from the perspective of the workers, labor organizers, activists, or the so-called regular people. So, like, forget this kind of global chessboard and forget about people being just pawns in the global game. Okay, as a matter of an introductory vignette to the entire issue, I wanted to share a story of a friend of mine, which, for the sake of anonymity, I call Volodya, his real name. But I have there is also a short update, and like literally 2 hours ago, because during the first session, a friend of mine was trying to reach me on the phone. I called him back during the break. It was a son of one of the union leaders in Ukraine, a former miner himself, who is now in the army, serving in the so-called ground zero, where things actually happen. And well, he wanted to share some news and some needs that he has. So this is the kind of first level of introduction to the realities that the Ukrainian working class and Ukrainian unions are facing now. But the proper vignettes, and I will try to be really as brief as possible, is this story of my friend Volodya, who back in the days in Ukraine, after graduating from sociology, couldn't find a kind of a proper job for a philosopher or any kind of trained humanist, started to work in different kind of technical and physical works. He became a very devoted activist, labor, maybe not an opinion journalist, but he ran a website informing about ongoing strikes, collective bargainings, and other forms of class struggles in his region. And like millions of Ukrainians, at some point, unable to make a proper living from his work in Ukraine, he came to Poland, where he worked as a as a welder on the industrial enterprises. He was not only working and earning money, but he was also taking detailed notes of what was happening in different workplaces. He worked with different migrants, mostly Ukrainians, but not only. He also worked with Colombians, Filipinos, Indians, Bangladeshis, and well, taking detailed notes and thinking what could be done with it. We were planning to make some kind of publication from these notes, but in February, exactly on 24th of February 2022, Volodya was supposed to attend a conference about the international debt of Ukraine, which took part in the Polish parliament, and I was quite happy to meet him in Warsaw. We were planning to spend some time together, and I wanted to attend this conference. But then the infamous 5 a.m. Happened. I called him just as I woke up, like already with the war raging for a couple of hours, and he was on the train still intending to attend the conference, but as he said, we had to cancel our plans for the weekend because he wanted to go back to Ukraine. So the conference took place, even if in this chaotic moments of first few hours of war. Volodya delivered a speech about the unjust international debt of Ukraine and the need for its cancellation. And almost like straight from the conference, he went to Ukraine, and straight from the railway station in Kyiv, he joined the territorial defense forces, later got transferred into a regular army. We stay in contact from time to time. We call each other, we text each other, and well, it's been third year that he's been in the army, in the front line. So why am I saying this? I hoped, and if it was not clear, I will mention it explicitly, like what this story of Volodya reveals to us, and what does it say. So labor migration from Ukraine, like Volodya was among millions of Ukrainian migrant workers abroad. I won't read the numbers. You can read the numbers by yourselves. Apart from labor migration, and I'm referring to the pre-22 period, remittances from the migrant workers into Ukraine the value of remittances was bigger than the value of international investments, which I think tells us a lot about not only the state of economy, but also about the contribution of the working class to the society. Okay. Since Volodya worked with different migrants, not only Ukrainians, we should also bear in mind that Poland is experiencing a huge growth in labor migration, not only from Ukraine or Belarus, but also from Colombia and other Latin American countries, from Indian subcontinent, and so on. The Ukrainian international debt, which Volodya was speaking against in the Polish parliament, has been suspended, but temporarily. So, like, for the moment, but who knows when it's going to be unfreezed again. So it's $65 billion that Ukraine is indebted to World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and other European institutions, but also like Russian Gazprom. So it's not only like, this is not only the global West that is at play here. And in the end, I think my references to the ongoing war were quite clear. It also brings our attention to the participation and non-participation of the working class and popular masses in the armed struggle, and the economic and livelihood changes in the face of war. Okay. So what the, just a fun fact, I thought, but I didn't inquire it at the very beginning, that keynotes will have more time than standard 20 minutes. So now I'm trying to squeeze, like, explaining the matter of the universe in this 20 minutes. Okay, so unions. I should have mentioned at the very beginning that as a union member, I'm a part of, I mean, our union, including myself, is a part of the International Workers' Aid to Ukraine campaign, and we do have contacts with different unions and grassroots movements and kind of progressive NGOs in Ukraine. So very briefly, what the Ukrainian unions struggle against now at the time of war. So the main problems are unpaid work and overdue wages, which I mean, it's a global issue, and it even in Ukraine it existed even without a war. Actually, all these problems existed before, but now they got kind of accelerated during the war. So extended work time, extended accounting periods, extended shifts, wage cuts, suspended supplemental pays. So basically, like work terms into shit. Health and safety and work has already been an issue, but again, it has worsened during war. It is either, in some cases, it is directly related to war and bombing and shelling of the infrastructure, workplaces, or regulations or unregulations regarding working during the air alerts. It is also indirectly related to the war, like things like power cuts, water cuts, or poor state of the infrastructure. They also impact workers' health and safety and at work. Right to education. This is like a broader campaign, because regarding students' living condition. Yeah, like there is higher education is still free in Ukraine, but there are lots of nuances into that. If I have time, I will tell about it later, or you can ask me the question about it. How does it? Where is the mothership of the thingy? Because okay. So basically, like, war has accelerated and the processes and the phenomena which have already been there, and in the shortest way possible, like it's all about deregulation of employment relations, precarization, and introducing these different forms of non-standard contracts, decline of the social dialogue and collective bargaining, prohibition of strikes and protests. Protests are de facto tolerated and demonstrations, even if they are not legal. There is a similar discussion that we had, at least in Poland, during pandemic and lockdown period, like whether you can prohibit people from expressing themselves and expressing their claims. But as my good friend and lawyer specializing in labor law said and written, these are the most radical kind of neoliberal, if that word means anything any longer, reform that Ukraine has experienced actually since independence. Yeah, these are the hardest, the toughest reforms in the history of Ukraine. Okay, maybe I will not refer to these numbers, but these are the examples of some laws introduced. Like the first one, this 2136 law has, okay, sorry, step back. Some of these changes, they were planned to be introduced. They were on the agenda already in 2019, 2020, 21. But at that time, the unions and so-called public opinion, they managed to block most of this unpopular solution. So what happened when the war broke out, under the shadow of war and state of exception, the government took out these unpopular solutions from the freezer, as we say in Poland. And this first law appeared on the agenda already, like in March, in first half of March 22. So that was the period where people were still kind of relocating, still like escaping from the eastern areas. That was still the time when not even Mariupol or Kharkiv, but even Kyiv was under partial siege, when the parliament and the government was debating about social cuts and changes in the labor code. So, and it continued. So this craziest ideas include like cancellation of salaries for the workers who join the army, which it can be quite discouraging both for work and for military service. Introducing something similar to 0-hour contracts, like contracts with flexible hours without a minimal amount of work guaranteed. And we know this kind of people, and we talk to people who have this kind of contracts. And the employers are allowed to change any kind of, to introduce changes in the ongoing acting contract. And unsurprisingly, very often these are the union leaders or some kind of troublemakers which are rewarded with this kind of solutions. Okay, now, do I still have time? Okay. Yes, so some examples like in the framework of this international campaign under the umbrella of the International Labor Network of Solidarity and Struggle, we stay in contact with miners and metal workers, railroad workers, medical workers, and students. And just to give you a hint of what they are facing. Yeah? So the work of miners and metal workers has never been the safest. Now, under these wartime conditions, these conditions have further deteriorated, and as unsurprisingly, the miners are also how to say, kind of quite needed and useful in the army. Yeah? These are the guys who know how to dig, like they can dig trenches. These are the guys who know how to deal with the explosives. These are the guys who know how to work hand in hand. Apart from everything else, they are also very often mobilized, regardless the fact that many of them volunteered to the army in the first weeks and months of the war. With the railroad workers, like railroads are critical infrastructure by default, but the fact that the railroads are critical both for civilian population and for military purposes, and the fact that the Ukrainian Railroad State Company is very kind of popular and it has a good PR, and they run a very interesting and often updated Facebook website. Unfortunately, does not get is not translated into area of employment relations. The railway unions are fighting for unpaid salaries. Some of them haven't been paid for months, since they cannot go on strike, which they used to do before the war. And even if you talk to them, very often they don't find it a proper thing to do under this critical in this critical situation. So they take things to court. The courts are overloaded, but they still do it. Yeah, apart from the fact that lots of railroad workers also have been mobilized or volunteered to the army, they are still struggling for the basic kind of, workers' rights. Medical workers, it's a even longer story, because as you can imagine, many of them work in military facilities or at the front lines as paramedics. Even the civilian hospitals hosts the wounded soldiers. So war for the medical workers means more work. And again, like unsurprisingly, even before the war, the state of public healthcare system in Ukraine was, to say the least, terrible. So medical workers very often, due to the poor condition of public healthcare system, they cannot even treat themselves, and with their salaries they cannot afford private treatment. They also have extended work time and extended shifts, sometimes more than 24 hours. Okay, we don't have enough time to speak about students, but you can ask me about it. And all these professional groups and all these unions, they also do a lot of volunteering. Apart from their full-time commitment, apart from their struggle at workplaces, they also do a lot of kind of humanitarian organizing for their first and foremost for the union members who serve in the army. And this is this is kind of important, because the unions in Ukraine, they are doing like two parallel things. Yeah, like first thing is continuing their union stuff. The second is supporting their members who are serving in the army. Okay, and I will try to. So from the very beginning of war, these union members and social activists, they expressed different requests and needs. Not only kind of, a political, moral about publicizing something, but also for particular kind of material support, predominantly, but not only for the army. And within this Workers' Aid for Ukraine, we organized a couple of not even a couple of, but events, mutual visits. We organize convoys with shipments, but these activities were also combined not only with delivering the stuff, but also to visiting different institutions or workplaces, having some exchange of thoughts or small small conferences, and both armed and social struggles in Ukraine have been appearing on the international and even global agenda. This is the picture of one of the union congresses in Brazil. So yeah. Okay, so from the very beginning of war in Ukraine, I've been stressing that we need this kind of we need these lenses of global struggles against exploitation, dispossession, colonialism, in order to fully understand what's happening in Ukraine, and also to kind of refine our solidarity, be it thick proletarian internationalists or whatever. And this is all also, from the academic point of view, this is a part of a process of dismantling these global hierarchies of knowledge and putting in motion this participatory and justice-seeking social sciences. And well, in the end, like what we as sociologists, anthropologists, whoever, we really need to observe the so-called processes of reconstruction of Ukraine and the hidden traps behind it, and still mind the debt. Some quick slides, and I will very slowly start saying thank you for your attention. So thank you for your attention, and please do contact me. Please do ask me at the corridor if you have any questions.
Thank you very much. So now it's time to open the floor for questions, and any questions, comments, confessions?
So I have a question to all the presenters, which is the following one, and also building up what on the open day discussions yesterday, where we as academics were actually suggesting to trade unions to do this and to do that, right? And trade unions kind of pushing back, saying, oh, maybe we should focus on our traditional kind of tasks, right? Because we have to be defensive. There are different challenges. So my question is exactly about this, right? How do we sort of build our strategies in such a way not to overburden the traditional core activities of trade unions? Do you have any suggestions for that? Do you have any ideas on how this can be done? Thank you.
Okay, so thank you all for those presentations, and my question goes to Ignacy, because I was wondering if you are aware of any regulations, wartime regulations pertaining to academic profession. So, because I heard of this Professor Shandor, who was giving his lectures from the trenches, but I'm just curious how are academics involved in the field, in the war field? So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the presenters. This one is, I guess, primarily to Paul, but also to Joan as well, if you want to jump in. We know that labour process theory has been kind of undergoing a transformation, and the ILPC has been very involved in that. I think it's been an attempt by some to kind of articulate labour process theory as a normal science, right? To kind of remove some of this political commitment that we think it was kind of initiated with. Obviously, Braverman, the widely recognised person who started the field, was very much a militant worker rather than an academic. So I wonder what your understanding is of why that process is happening, what you think some of the incentives are, and what we can do to attempt to, I guess, resist the defanging of our discipline and our theoretical approaches.
Thank you. Yeah, it's related to the question that gentleman who just passed me this asked, you know, about burdening and about other kind of work. So there's a question for, you know, for Jane, because, you know, it seems like I think most of us, yeah, would agree and would probably like to take part and often have taken part in our ways, you know, in that kind of education in that formal way, you know, teach-ins is one way, or get lectures, special lectures, at times of special events. But you know, but you yourself said that these schools were popular when most workers didn't have formal schooling, right? So now, of course, formal schooling is universal, and through late secondary for the most part. Obviously, there are differences. So it seems that, you know, we can't really expect that that's going to become a you know, a mass kind of phenomenon, and I could see how this would burden unions to think that it is. I mean, of course, you know, I wonder if you, or maybe this is related to what Paul was talking about too, you know, podcasts, right? I mean, I actually was contacted, a global labor school. I have a colleague, he's now in Switzerland, and someone from South Africa, I think, is organizing it, you know, and you know, so I gave a podcast on labor relations in Poland, right? And now I have to, you know, meet with them. It seems like that's the kind of way that education is going to happen. And finally, there's also the social media effect, right? I mean, these days there are a million podcasts and everyone can feel themselves an expert, and of course does, you know, and so, you know, I just wonder, yeah, whether this can last, and whether, you know, this is really a good use of resources for struggles ahead, let's say. Thank you.
Thanks. So since we have one microphone that is working, so yeah. So Paul, you first, yeah.
Thanks. Specifically, they're kind of related to the one that David, that you posted, to Callum's point in a way. I think, yeah, about the labor process, you know, a lot of you may know Theo Nichols, the famous British labor sociologist, who once, looking labor process conference, said it was an intellectually pretentious way of talking about work. So the defanging, I think, has been going on for a long time. In fact, you might say from the formation of the ILPC, International Labour Process Conference, I can't say attempt, because I'm not talking about cultural shifts in the way in which ideas work in a particular way, but we think that, you know, the two of the prominent players in that conference, the original conference, David Knights and Hugh Wilmot, good guys, socialists, but, you know, their work is not concerned with labour subordination and class power. It's concerned with issues around subjectivity, which aren't separate from that, but aren't connected with that, the motivation that drove Braverman initially. And then the ILPC, which eventually, you know, and you don't know, critical management studies comes out of a break, actually a political organizational break, with the ILPC in 2004. And that was actually really did to turn the labour process into technical idea about work and work organisation. But at the same time, I mean, it didn't matter in a way, because a lot of socialist education, worker education, was conducted by trade unions, also by, I mean, I'm involved in this although CSE doesn't really exist now, but when I first went to Conference Socialist Economist Conference in mid-1990s, I mean, we had 2,000 people at it, you know, these conferences. This is, CSE is the organization which is the backbone of capital and class. You had labour movement organizations, trade unions, which had independent scholars and work with people, including somebody like Miguel Martinez, who worked with the Communication Workers Union for a long time. Jane did a lot of work with Unite and other unions. And what we found was, what's a surprise? We're social scientists. Don't we know that these are institutions, part of capitalist society? And, you know, and I forget what the phrase Miguel used, but, you know, when we did a lot of work with the Auto Workers Union, with Unite, TNG, Transport and General Workers Union, Unite. This is all by way of saying that the process is going on more widely in society affected labour unions, and actually labour unions weren't got to the point they weren't actually interested in radical alternative ideas either. So Miguel and I would, get on quite well, the General Secretary of Unite, but very quickly, when we did our work, that was very good. We worked with shop stewards at the local level, but actually, we want to formalise this. Why don't we have HRM training for our officers? And, so the bureaucracy, the kind of things going on more widely were affecting trade unions as well, and political education was marginalised. And also then the spaces as labour movement, went into retreat, the spaces for independent socialist ideas, articulation of these became less and less prominent. And at the same time, our own parochial little thing, Labour Process Conference or CMS became more institutionalized. Instead of thinking, let's actually turn to the working class and communities and social movement organizations, let's do more work in the university. Let's have a journal. Fine, yeah, okay, but I mean that's not what our motive would be. And yes, David, well, we do all those kind of things, but of course, a bit like, we all know online teaching is very great, but students don't like it because they like to be in a classroom and get pissed and have coffee together and talk to one another, because we need this sociality of collective of that collective action needs that collective endeavor. So, I think the labour process is it's been defanged for a long time. And the formation of the journal, of the Labour Process Journal, is some consummation of that process. I think, and maybe we talking about critical labour studies. I don't think probably anybody is in this room is not involved in critical labour studies in some way. But I guess that's in some ways our point, that we need agendas which go beyond the academy. I think that Jane can talk a lot more about this, because Ella Baker is really quite distinctive, and you need these kinds of things beyond the podcast, I suppose, because you watch a podcast on your own,
Yeah, so thanks for that. So I'll pick up on that question then about not overburdening trade unions. I mean, I think it's about thinking differently and different ways of doing things. So just to put things in context, when lockdown happened, the Ella Baker School switched to all our materials online. We had no option but to do that. But it was really interesting what happened, because we just opened this to anybody who wanted to come along, and we'd have hundreds of people online in the training sessions. But we don't do lectures. We might speak for a little bit, put some ideas out there, and then we get people into groups to talk. And what was really interesting is that people said to us, we got lots of feedback after we'd done the training, is that people were in the room with people they'd never normally be in a room with. And that was what was really interesting. We'd got trade unions, we'd got climate activists, we'd got anti-racist campaigners, we'd got people who were my age and Paul's age, and we'd got people who were in their teens. And those people would never, ever, in any other form of training, be actually in the same room together. And they learned so much from each other. And that's what they thought, that, that different lived experience was really, really important. And I think unions could do more in thinking things through in this way. I mean, just to touch on Jane McAlevy's training, people might know that Jane died just a few months ago, but she was a fantastic trade union organizer. And she was involved in organising for power, where they'd have at least 10,000 people on a Zoom call from 30 plus countries, but people working in groups, but then taking that training and then doing it themselves. And that's what we try and do within the school as well. So in terms of, not overburdening trade unions, it's about saying to trade unions, why don't you make use of the resources you have within your own union? Trade union training, in most cases, is just with union activists. It's not with union members. And I have no idea why that is the case. Why are we not using that resource? And, we've got lots of people in unions who are educators who would be happily involved in this sort of work, where they can take the training. Like I said, we make all the training in Ella Baker absolutely free. You can go to the website, download it. There's speakers' notes, there's PowerPoints, there's all the workshops. Anybody can pick up this training and use it and to organise. So I think, it's about thinking how we could pick up on that untapped resource that's there to widen the scope of political education and get more people involved in different forms and do it in different groups, whether that be in trade unions or in wider community organisations as well.
Where to start? So maybe I will start from this not overburdening unions, but I will be short because, like, you know, in my case, or in the case of the union I'm a member of, Inicjatywa Pracownicza Workers Initiative, we are a grassroots union or union organization. And well, we do not have kind of, you know, union bureaucracies or actual kind of union leaders. So this kind of barrier between, like, you know, us and them, or what shall we do about the unions, like, well, I'm not even trying to be objective now, but I kind of believe that this problem doesn't apply to us, because, you know, we are, like, you know, we are all the union. Yeah, like this is, like, you know, I'm a part of, you know, my kind of, you know, workplace section. I'm a part of the broader movement that Inicjatywa Pracownicza is trying to develop. So this is, like, you know, this grassroots or social movement unionism is something completely different from this traditional big union bureaucracies. So I don't, yeah, so this is where I should put them. Okay, and taking the questions which were addressed to me. Okay, I will start with from the question about the public opinion and the public perception of the unions in Ukraine. Well, it is a very difficult question and a very difficult issue, because in general, unions do not have a good kind of PR among the society, and even among the working class. There is a big kind of there is this huge burden of old kind of Soviet, post-Soviet bureaucratic union structures, which mostly, like, you know, which were used to be known for actually working as a force which suppressed workers. So this is one thing. But what might be even more important is the structure of the labor market itself, and the segmentation of the labor market. Yeah, the unions exist, and I am talking about this traditional kind of, you know, big professional organizations. They exist in branches like industry, railroads, education, but they are not always very active. Yeah, like so. So they have, even if they do, because, like, you know, in my brief presentation, I was trying to focus on these good examples among the existing unions, those that actually do something. The medical workers are a bit of an exception, because they are kind of new and grassroots initiative. But even if they do something, they don't have a good public outreach. Like, they do stuff for their members or for their profession, so they don't appear on the media. If you check, you know, the information websites, and, you know, if you watch TV, you don't hear about the unions. It was a bit kind of easier and somehow better at the very beginning of war, where unions were using their resources in order to help the IDPs, and so that was, they had this kind of short moment then. And so this is, yeah. I wrote something more, but I cannot read myself now. So no, but regarding this question, so yes, I cannot read myself, so my handwriting, so maybe later. Kamil, you asked about regulations regarding the academic work. So basically, like, you know, the example that you gave of Tomasz Gaspar, the social geographer, he was serving in the army while delivering his lectures online. I think it wasn't because he was afraid to lose his job or to keep his salary. This was his kind of a principle. But depending on the region, the education is either fully online or hybrid or kind of fully on-site. So a lot depends on the region and cities. Like everyone else, the university or research institutions employees got some had experience some cuts in their top-ups and supplements and stuff, and teachers and university lecturers are officially exempted from the military conscription, but there are some exceptions from that, and I think this is all I can say about the academics.
I just have small reflection at the very end of the session that perhaps, we are really speaking about very different realities of this cooperation between labor and academia. And I think in many respects, what you were talking, Ian, was the established institutionalized cooperations and traps of this cooperation. Then we had the cooperations which are more grassroots social movements and so on. And we have the cooperation which is here, which is really nascent, which is kind of developing from very scratches, and this was perhaps also close to what Ignacy was talking. And I think it was fascinating to compare those various realities of solidarities and cooperations in various localities in the world. So thanks again.